the most important connection that Columbus, the student of traveling and voyaging and maps, the most important connection he makes in his life is a connection to Renaissance Florence. He's not a Florentine, he never goes to Florence, but in his writing and in his reading, he makes a connection to the most exciting intellectual center in the whole world in the 1470s and 80s, and that's Florence. Florence is a center of knowledge, of books, of the study of Greek and Latin, and of copies of Ptolemy, the great geographer, Greek language geographer, living in Alexandria in Egypt, a city founded by Alexander the Great.
Now, what's the connection? Well, the connection between the two is this man, Paolo Toscanelli. That's an engraving of him over there on the right of the picture. Paolo Toscanelli, 1397 to 1482. He knows Columbus. The two of them are going to correspond, and it's their correspondence that connects all of this Renaissance research, all of this Renaissance knowledge together. So just think about that. Here is this man, Paolo Toscanelli, in Florence, born in the 1300s, so way back, and lives to 1482, very long life, and his life will now overlap that of this young Genovese navigator who born in 1450, so he'd be 20 or so in the 70s and then 80s. And it's this connection between Columbus in Portugal, Toscanelli in Florence, that explains the connection between the Florentine Renaissance and the breakthroughs of the navigators of the world. Here is a map that Toscanelli made in Florence based on Ptolemy that he's going to send to a friend. And here it is. He writes a letter to a friend in Portugal, in Lisbon. And in his letter, he includes a map. And in his letter to his friend, Fernando Martins in Lisbon, priest at the cathedral, he explains to this friend his map and his vision of the world based on Ptolemy. Now, remember, we're back to Ptolemy. And in the letter, he suggests that a navigator could sail west and they'd reach the Spice Islands in Asia. In other words, they'd reach the Indies. Martins read the letter to the king of Portugal, and so this story became well known in Portugal. Columbus in Lisbon was around the cathedral, and so he now sees the letter. He's in Lisbon and he sees the letter from Toscanelli. So he writes to Toscanelli in Florence. Although we don't have the original Toscanelli letter, we do have the correspondence back and forth, references to it, so we know that Columbus was corresponding with Toscanelli. He had them with him, some of the letters on the trip, and here's another reconstruction of the map that he had, which of course is guesswork, but it is at least helpful. And so Columbus in Lisbon is seeing this letter and seeing this, and so he writes to Toscanelli, and so now begins a correspondence. And it's that correspondence, you see, that's our fascination and our link to Renaissance Florence and Columbus. Columbus is, of course, Genovese. He's not Florentine, but it's in Lisbon that he sees all this. Julie wanted to know, why was he in Lisbon? Well, he had been a navigator for years. He had been a sailor. He'd been on many, many, many ships. And he had been up the coast of Portugal all the way to England, and into various ports in England, and to Iceland. So he knew the Baltic and all the rest of it. And when he's in a ship on the coast of Portugal, the ship goes down just off the coast, close enough, though, that the men could save themselves. and so he swims into the coast and moves into Lisbon and begins to ship out and become connected with people there. He was very sophisticated already. He's still in his 20s, but he's already sailed a lot. Here's Toscanelli. Here's just a little bit of Toscanelli's letter. So also in the time of Pope Eugenius in Florence, who happened to be in Florence at that time, one of them, traveler from China, came to Pope Eugenius, who affirmed their great kindness towards Christians, and I, Toscanelli, had a long conversation with him on many subjects about the magnitude of their rivers and the length and the breadth and on the multitude of cities and the banks. And he said, this traveler, that on one river there were near 200 cities. That was China, marble bridges, great in length and breadth, and everywhere adorned with columns, and this country is worth seeking by the Latins, Europeans, not only because great wealth, but all the gold and silver that can be obtained from it, and the gems and the spices, which never get here, but also on account of the learned men, the philosophers, the astrologers, etc. So that's a letter of Toscanelli. The said voyage is not only possible, but it is true and certain to be honorable and to yield incalculable profit and a very great fame among all Christians. But you cannot know this perfectly save through experience, meaning get in your ship and go, as I have had in the form of the most copious and good and true information from distinguished men of great learning who have come from the various parts here in the court of Rome, and from others, being merchants who have had business for a long time in those parts, men of high. So, in other words, here's the connection between Florence, Renaissance, Columbus, and navigation. And it's the critical theme for us to start our whole discussion tonight, because what we have to realize is that Columbus is this whole tradition of knowledge. This isn't just some sailor who jumped into a ship and got some men to come with him. No. This is 100 years of Italian navigational research that comes into his hands, his specific hands, in Lisbon, in Portugal, at exactly the right moment. Everything about his situation in Lisbon was perfect. It was exactly perfect. He was living in one of the most progressive countries in all of Europe in regards to navigation. He had with him a vast amount of personal experience sailing, which meant he understood ships and sails. And he had connections high in Portuguese society, enough so that he was going to approach the King of Portugal to try to finance this trip that Toscanelli had said could be pursued. So it's him, and at this moment that all of this can happen in the next few years. Greek astronomy, Italian maps, compasses, exploration, all the rest of it.